Well, hello. It is time. It is time to get back onto the lives, and it's time to share more of the syntropic wisdom, the good gospel. And I'm just excited that I have the opportunity to collaborate with Earth Heroes TV, where all this in more depth is stored and shared, everything to do with awakening our sovereignty. Some of you may know that I have successfully released a beautiful, beautiful workshop called the Awakening Sovereignty Workshop. It's a mini workshop and it's just a great introduction. If you're new to this topic, you may just want to grab this link. I'll quickly put it in the chat. What we what we're about to dive into today is what does the ancient indigenous lifeways and teachings, what do they have to do with awakening sovereignty? I'm also putting here the ignition post that actually is the foundation to this little broadcast that I'm creating. Here's the link to the workshop space. If you felt attracted, you can just follow up on that. But particularly today, I have an ignition post that is all about what do ancient indigenous perspectives have to do with awakening sovereignty? Well, pretty much everything. And a lot of this has to do is that we've been confounded in our language, and we've all been born in the world of the language that we've all commonly used as our form of relating. I've started a beautiful club for people to join in around, where we go in depth into the pulling apart of the cult programming. And the best way to do that is to observe what indigenous language structures and syntax have always been based on. And what we can see through the English language is that we have a very strong noun-based language. A lot of fantasies included in that are also nouns, like the queen. Well, such a concept is a man-made idea that is not a living reality. And so I shared in this beautiful post that I put up across my Facebook and other places, but I put it here in the description as well, that the indigenous perspectives were of the natural order, were of a natural way of relating to life, the understanding and understanding of the interconnectedness of all living things, the relationships to all our relations. And when we translate indigenous native tongues back into English, or forward into English, if we want to call it that, we may very well find that a lot is actually going amiss and a lot is being lost in translation. And what today is really about is that we've been confounded in our language. And this has been going on since a very, very long time. But particularly in the Awakening Sovereignty Foundations workshop that I mentioned, there is an in-depth sharing around how English was formed. And I will just give you one name that you may want to Google. It's Sir Francis Bacon. And he was chartered and asked to basically contract all of the dialects and all of the different language forms of the Celtic tongues and the Scottish tongues and all those ancient languages of what we now may call the United Kingdom, to bring them into a cohesive one format. And that's the language that we are all using. And what the study of language really allows us to see when we look through the lens of syntropy is that we can start seeing what actually isn't real and what actually isn't living. And without a language contrast that allows us to feel again what the natural order is really about, what natural justice therefore is about, and therefore also the recognition of what real sovereignty is contained in, we we're stabbing in the dark. And so I'm starting a very exciting project for the next 3 months. It's called the Awakening Sovereignty Language Club. And if you're interested, just drop a line in the comments, say a yes, say a hey, give it a love heart. Look on my profile. I'll put a link in the description later on. But in this club and this group, this small pilot group that I've started, we're going to be really delving into the language, and the language that you use, the language that I use, and the language, how we use it. And what really is beautiful about the syntropic orientation that I bring to this conversation and this inquiry and the discovery is that we can measure and again feel whether the language that we are witnessing or hearing other people speak, or that we are using ourselves, actually is what I would say full reality. We can never ever speak full reality totally. And at the same time, there is an opportunity for us to train ourselves to use language more to the essence of what it is that we're feeling and what we're thinking, in order to consciously create with more impact and more effect. And there's a lot that we're going to be diving into tomorrow morning, Bali time, which is 8 p.m. EST in New York. And one of the things is we're going to go to the roots of certain words and what they actually really mean. And that when we look into the English language and we study the etymological lines, we can actually retrieve that there is so much still rooted in connection to the living world, but our understanding and our comprehension of it hasn't been given that in our own day-to-day life. And that's because, of course, all the cult programming. Now, what particularly becomes perceivable by looking through this lens of syntropy are all the deceptions, all the false narratives, and all the programs that have become normal in our Western and, colonized mindsets. But normal doesn't necessarily mean that therefore it's natural. And in my discovery and my return to this awareness of how language is so foundational to how we see ourselves, how we relate to each other, how we communicate, how we express ourselves. And having been born in this corporatized structural world that is full of language syntax that is all based on contracts, we get an opportunity to really look at that, because we create a contrast with this lens of syntropy. And today I just wanted to give a brief introduction to what is all happening. I'm going to do regular Awakening Sovereignty broadcasts and updates in relationship to what we're discussing in the club, and what the outcomes and what the findings have been, and what the beautiful topics are that are being brought forth and that I can bring to the table. That once we have a contrast, once we have a different way of relating to certain word and language use, if that form of language use actually isn't true language use, the beautiful thing is then we can upgrade and up-level and actually unsubscribe from ineffective language use, and starting to navigate ourselves with language that actually more articulately expresses what it is that we're really feeling. Now, one of the guarantees that I feel that I can put out for people that are joining and have joined this club is that there is an ability to feel language again. This has a lot to do with the foundations that I've laid through the mini workshop. The link's in the description. Go check it out. It has a lot to do with our will. And our will is intimately tied to our sense of our own self-sovereignty. And how we can start recultivating the effective use of our will is actually by rediscovering how we can start willing ourselves to feel again. And with that, also feel the truth in language. Now, one relevant distinction that I feel is really beneficial to share is that syntropy and the lens thereof takes you out of judgment. And when you can look at the distortions and the deceptions and the non-truths and the lies from a place of pure observation without getting triggered or without feeling that we need to go into blaming or shaming somebody for it, we actually get access to perceiving that which is not real and that which is a fantasy for what it is. Now, that may sound very simple, but most people, and myself included, have for the longest time seen untruths, seen lies, seen deceptions, and gotten from within ourselves that sense of like, we're being lied to, it's a deception. Syntropy and the study thereof allows us to travel through time, what I call seeing and feeling through time, because we always go to the root causes of where distortions and deceptions or malfunctions in any system actually come from, because everything has a root cause. Now, that is something that is unique about this syntropic orientation, because we question the function of whether it's a period of time, whether it's a very influential form giver to our conceptual understandings of reality. And the Freemasons have been there galore to inform humanity, and that later got turned into education material, so that humans today are raised and given into a system that programs them to believe a whole bunch of things that actually aren't true. And for as long as we don't have the distinction whether what is being taught or what is being shared, whether that actually has a basis in the living reality of our sovereign nature as human beings, if we don't have that contrast or those distinctions, we're going to just go along. And this is something that I'm really passionate about shifting, because I have been on the journey to really bring into being a new earth, a new paradigm, and have dedicated my life for the past 15 years to that. And in that, really refound so much of my own wholeness in that process. And I'm not going to go on for very long today, because I just wanted this to be the introductory broadcast. But I just want to recap briefly that the indigenous perspectives, they have a lot to do with awakening sovereignty, because that offers us a lens of a way of relating to life that was before the colonized world. And in this club, I'm going to go into that. You're more than welcome to join. There's a few seats still available. I'll just quickly put the link here in the chat if you wanted to check it out. And then you can just inform yourselves to see if you feel attracted to this wonderful, wonderful fantasy, which is what it is, of a club that I have created and that people have joined into. In the post that is the ignition post to this broadcast, you will read the full download on what I've just shared. I just thought that I feel that it's good time to start talking about the end of a period of time that was of ignorance, of uninformedness, and that we are the ones that get to change that time period for ourselves. And of course, the title of this broadcast would have made people feel like, oh my God, he's going to be talking about a lizard Beth, the lizard. Well, I could, and I may. She was a fantasy queen, and that realm of fiction is just what it is, pure fiction. And it's idolatry of the greatest degree that has mind-spelled so many humans by the millions all across the world. I don't need to make too many words dirty about it. I've had very intimate navigation with her own archonic essence over the years, and have found my own retrieval of all that was tied to this archetypal principle of the queen, and really dissolved the attachments and the programs internally within myself. And that's something that if you're interested in hearing about, you can reach out to me and I'll be able to share a little bit more about that. But we have a real opportunity in the here, in the now, to shift ourselves, our own awakening of our own sovereignty. And language in that really, really governs our consciousness. And that's a statement that is not a light statement. That is a statement that really indicates that we are operating on language structures that are all ideas, concepts, and fantasies about reality. And many of those don't actually have a basis in the living world that we operate in. And so, with that all being said, I'm just going to close out and end with a little confession of me as a new earther. And I have been, as I said, in this realm of new earth orientations for a very, very long time. Many of you may know that I've been a strong voice for a different way of relating to reality. I'm offering a perspective through the lens of syntropy that I think really, really benefits people, because it is about reclaiming our sovereignty through indigenous lifeway understandings. And I just want to thank you for being here today. And I will look forward to sharing more on these Awakening Sovereignty broadcasts that are going to be coming out as the club rolls out over the next 3 months. I'm going to say ciao for now, and I look forward to hearing from you. Please just leave a comment, connecting with me if you're interested to hear more. And of course, share these messages out. Share videos like this out to your groups. Share what you feel benefits other people also hearing. And this is just a short introduction. There's so much more that I would love to dive into. But that's all kept for another day and another time. Choo-choo. I have been a new earther for well over 15 years, if there is such a thing, such an acronym, but let's just use that. For me, it's always addressing the root cause and finding the root cause of the challenges that we face. And so I can empathize a lot with what people are struggling with, because our heart is saying this world isn't a true world. When you go and study the Gnostic understandings from way back in the 1500s and 1400s, already then there were awakened souls walking the earth that recognized that the world of man that was being created around them based on taxes and systems of governance, that it was formulated as a bad copy, a false copy of the original blueprint, the original metric that obviously is entropic. So this living in an entropic environment that is mostly a mindscape that has been created as society forms itself, in our inner being, there's a misalignment with it. And it's only when we reclaim our own host role and when we reclaim and restore our own wholeness, in my own experience, that we really get a way out of that. And one of the challenges for me in that sense around money was that in order to financially break free, so to speak, and stay true to my own heart, I felt I had to participate in the bad world, in the world that I found to be a matrix of programs and beliefs and orientations that I had unresolved frequencies around. And that was when I left the Netherlands and the lead up to that. And of course, in hindsight, I can take those things as a blessing. But I wish that this type of conversation would have come into my field, let's say 10 years ago, and I would have had ears to hear it. Because the hardest thing about all of this is actually not the addressing of relationship out there. It's the relationship in here. That, and for me, it's not just about shifting belief systems or reprogramming our mind so that we put a lot of affirmations on our mirror that say, I'm open to the abundance of the universe. There is a realignment with our inner truth. And over that inner truth has set for me a lot of hurt and a lot of pain and a lot of burden. And I was not willing to feel that. And what I instead did, I just became a new earther, and I dreamt a beautiful dream, and I lived a courageous and bold and unique life and walked a very narrow path. But was it filled with abundance? No, there was always just enough. And that's fine. But does it provide me with the more relevant comforts, like my own shelter, that I don't have to figure out how I'm going to put the rent together over the next 6 months, or all those thoughts? And a lot of my journey started shifting when I started this path of awakening sovereignty, looking at the language programs, and really starting to slowly recognize that I was orientating myself in a disempowered way because of that hurt, but my language that I used because of that was not aiding me. And so I stopped also saying after a while, I can't, or I don't know, or the sentences that were based on I need this. Once I studied Syntropy, I realized the original metric, the original blueprint, is based on abundance. And what sits in the way of that is programming, but that programming is held by my stories that I was still barking up against within myself. And that had very much to do with the world of man, with the dissatisfaction and the resentment, really the resentment towards the matrix. And that's a toxic brew. It's, it's nice to dream about a new civilization and a new generation that changes the direction as to where we're all going collectively. But if underneath that there is a resentment that drives that vision, well, you can't generate abundance out of a toxic soil environment. It doesn't really work.